The Vietnam War, a long and brutal conflict, was rooted in the history of Vietnam itself. For centuries, Vietnam had struggled against foreign domination, from Chinese empires to French colonialism. After World War II, the Vietnamese people, led by Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Minh, fought for independence from France. The First Indochina War ended in 1954 with the defeat of the French. However, the peace was short-lived. Vietnam was temporarily divided into two parts, North and South, with the promise of future elections to reunify the country. The stage was set for a new conflict, one that would draw in the United States and become a defining moment of the Cold War era. The Geneva Accords of 1954 officially ended the First Indochina War and divided Vietnam along the 17th parallel. The North, under Ho Chi Minh's communist leadership, aimed for reunification under a single socialist government. The South, supported by the United States, sought to establish an independent, non-communist state. This division reflected the global political climate of the Cold War, a struggle between communism and democracy. The United States, fearing the domino theory, the idea that if one country fell to communism, others in the region would follow, provided significant economic and military aid to South Vietnam. The Geneva Accords called for nationwide elections in 1956 to reunify the country. However, these elections never took place, further fueling the tensions that would lead to war. The Vietnam War escalated gradually throughout the early 1960s. The United States, under President John F. Kennedy, increased its military advisors in South Vietnam. The conflict intensified under President Lyndon B. Johnson following the 1964 Gulf of Tonkin incident, a disputed confrontation between U.S. Navy destroyers and North Vietnamese torpedo boats. The Gulf of Tonkin incident gave President Johnson the justification he needed to seek congressional authorization for expanded military action in Vietnam. The United States embarked on a sustained bombing campaign against North Vietnam, known as Operation Rolling Thunder, and deployed hundreds of thousands of ground troops to fight alongside the South Vietnamese army. The Vietnam War was marked by strong personalities on both sides of the conflict. Ho Chi Minh, the revered leader of North Vietnam, was a symbol of Vietnamese nationalism and resistance against foreign powers. In the south, Ngo Dinh Diem, the first president of the Republic of Vietnam, faced criticism for his authoritarian rule and persecution of Buddhist groups. On the American side, General William Westmoreland commanded U.S. military forces in Vietnam, while Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara played a key role in shaping U.S. war policy. The war also gave rise to prominent figures who opposed it, such as Senator J. William Fulbright and activist Martin Luther King, Jr. Section 5. The Battlefield: Strategies and Tactics. The Vietnam War was fought on multiple fronts, with distinct strategies employed by each side. The North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong guerrillas in the south engaged in a protracted guerrilla war. They utilized hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, and a complex network of underground tunnels to combat a technologically superior enemy. The U.S. military relied heavily on its firepower, employing massive bombing campaigns, helicopter assaults, and search-and-destroy missions to try and root out the elusive enemy. However, the jungle terrain, the resilience of the North Vietnamese forces, and the growing unpopularity of the war in the United States created significant challenges for the American military. Section 6. The Tet Offensive: Turning the Tide. The Tet Offensive, launched by the North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong in January 1968, marked a turning point in the Vietnam War. Although a military defeat for the Communists, the Tet Offensive had a profound psychological impact on the United States. The offensive shattered the American public's perception that the war was winnable and undermined support for the Johnson administration's war policies. The Tet Offensive exposed the credibility gap between the Johnson administration's optimistic assessments of the war's progress and the reality on the ground. It fueled growing anti-war sentiment in the United States and led to a shift in public opinion against the war. Section 7. A Nation Divided: Dissent and Protest. As the Vietnam War dragged on, opposition to the war grew significantly within the United States. The anti-war movement gained momentum on college campuses, in cities, and even within the US military itself. Protests against the draft, war casualties, and the morality of the war became increasingly common. Students, civil rights activists, and ordinary citizens raised their voices against the war. The anti-war movement reflected the deep divisions within American society over the Vietnam War and its impact on American values and foreign policy. The movement played a significant role in turning public opinion against the war and ultimately contributed to the decision to withdraw US troops from Vietnam. Section 8. The Fall of Saigon, End of an Era. By 1973, under President Richard Nixon, the United States had signed the Paris Peace Accords with North Vietnam, agreeing to a ceasefire and the withdrawal of all remaining US combat troops. However, the peace was short-lived. In the spring of 1975, North Vietnamese forces launched a massive offensive, capturing Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, on April 30, 1975. The fall of Saigon marked the end of the Vietnam War and the reunification of Vietnam under communist rule. The war had a devastating impact on Vietnam, leaving millions dead and the country in ruins. For the United States, the Vietnam War was a costly and divisive conflict, leaving lasting scars on the American psyche and shaping its foreign policy in the decades to come. Section 9. Legacy of War Scars and Reflections. The Vietnam War left an indelible mark on both Vietnam and the United States. In Vietnam, the war resulted in widespread physical destruction, environmental damage, and the loss of countless lives. The country faced significant challenges in rebuilding its infrastructure and healing the wounds of war. The war also had a profound impact on the United States, leading to a period of national self-reflection and a reassessment of its role in the world. The Vietnam War divided American society, sparked anti-war protests, and raised questions about the limits of American power. It also led to a decline in public trust in the government and a re-examination of US foreign policy priorities. The legacy of the Vietnam War continues to shape debates about military intervention, the use of American power, and the responsibility to remember and learn from the past.